Hi everyone, welcome back to the Hosting Made Simple series. I'm Gertie Golden, and before we dive into today's cPanel tour, I need you to have three things ready. The first one is the domain name, and then the second one is a hosting account with cPanel access, and this is your server space. Then you also need the cPanel login details to your cPanel, and these are always provided by your hosting provider. So why you really need this is because hosting without a domain is like building a house in the desert and with no address. So no one can find the house. So without a server, your files have nowhere to live. So if you do not have any of these, you do not have to worry, but you must buy these for maybe most of the hosting providers like Namecheap or Hostinga. There is also Bluehost, or you can also purchase from a local provider in maybe your country. So you really need these if you're looking forward to hosting, and they usually sell both the domain and the server as a package, and also the price differs based on the provider from whom you're buying, and most of the times you can also buy based on a particular subscription. It could be per month, but for example, for shared hosting, it is always done annually. You could be subscribing. So once you have all these, let's jump inside the cPanel and see what tools we will actually use for hosting our websites. So before we move into the cPanel tour, I think it's also very key that we also get more insights on what a cPanel is. So a cPanel is always a web hosting control panel that provides a graphical user interface for managing web hosting accounts, but it really simplifies tasks like website management, email setup, database administration, and also file management. And this always makes it easier for users to handle their online presence without needing extensive expertise. So with that shared, let's get started with our cPanel tour. So having bought the domain and the server, you'll be given access to the cPanel depending on your hosting provider. So for my provider, this is what I do have, and this is the default login page. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. So whenever I log into the cPanel, this is how the interface is going to look like. But at some point, it would differ. The user interface would differ depending on your provider. But for most of the shared hosting providers, this is how the cPanel always looks like. So the cPanel always has a main section for the tools, and then on the other hand, for the general information, it always displays the current user and also the primary domain, which is this .com. And you see that I'm working with a top level domain for .com, but there are also domains like a .org or .co.ug or .ug, so depending on your exact need. And also with the general information section, you always see the IP address to which your domain name points, and also the home directory. And yeah, that is it for now. But anyway, so we want to focus on the tools that we are going to be working with in terms of the cPanel. So you see that the cPanel has a number of tools, but I want us to focus on the most important tools that we really need to understand as beginners. So allow me first of all minimize this section for the emails for now, and same applies to the bidding. So the first tool is the files, and with the files section, this is always where we first of all, when you look at this, it has the file manager, the emails, the directory privacy, web disk, FTP account, backup wizard, the Git version, and etc. So as a beginner, most of the times you do not have to work with this, but the most important tool under the files section is the file manager. So I'm going to right click and then open this in a new tab. So the file manager is always like your computer's file explorer, and you can always upload your code or unzip and even edit files here. So by default, this is how the file manager is going to look like. So it gives you access to accessing the files based on, of course, the file permissions or folder permissions that have been added. but by default, this is what you're always going to see. When you look at the sidebar here, you see that it always points to the home directory. So /home and then according to the domain that you're working with. So there are cases whereby maybe your domain name is pretty long and sometimes this would be trimmed to a few characters. And it also has some other like the logs in here, then the public HTML folder, and then the SSL folder and etc. So when I click on this, you see that these other subfolders are also captured here. And when you look at the attributes, each file or subfolder always has a name, the size, the last modified date, the type, and the permissions that have been assigned. Then on the top here, you see that there is a back icon. Then we cannot move forward, but we can reload. Then you can select all, and you can also maybe unselect all. Then you can also view trash, and apparently it is empty. And then at the top here on the, it's more like the nav, but anyway, the header section here, you see that we do have the ability of creating a new file. And when I click on it, I have the ability of, for example, creating a new file like maybe testing. Of course, files always have a file extension. For example, if it is testing, actually it would be demo, maybe demo.txt, for example. And then where exactly do you want to create this file? So apparently it is showing this kind of path, but you notice that maybe this is not where I want to have it created. So instead, for example, if I wanted maybe to create it in a public HTML folder, I could type this here. And of course, I can go ahead and add the slash, then I say create a file in this directory. So when I come back to this public folder, you see that now the demo.txt file is there, and also the created at or the last modified attribute or column here is always updated, and you see that it has been updated at this exact time. And also the permissions are set. You can always do further research on how or what the permissions do mean. But when you look at the permissions, the file permissions are always represented with 3 digits, though sometimes for most shared hosting providers, but for shared hosting, it is usually 3. And for example, you see that this is 644. So each digit represents who can do what. For example, the first digit, which is a 6, this represents the owner or the user who owns the file. And the second digit always represents the group or what other users can, or what other users in the same group can do or can, depending on the permission. And the last digit always points to the public or the world, meaning that anyone else. So permissions vary from the owner to the group and then to the public. So each digit is always a sum of some permissions. Like for example, the value 4 is always a read, and these are always permissions for the Unix environment like Linux. And you also come to notice that most of the servers always have the Unix-like environment, like for example, the Linux operating system. So when you look at this 4, this means that this is a permission for read, and read is always represented with arrows. So it therefore means that I do have the permission of reading. So it's more like can read the file, can this user read the file? And then most of the times you also see values like 2, and 2 is always for writing, if you can really modify a file or a user in that group. And then the 1 is for executing, that is if a user can run the file. And then for the 0, it means that the user does not have permission to do that. So most of the times we always tend to sum up these permissions for each category. So if, for example, we do have a 4 plus 2 and 4 for reading, then +2 for writing, and then 1 for executing to sum up 7. It therefore means that the owner of this folder has the ability of reading, writing, and also executing. Then when you look at the 5, that means that we did have a summation of 4, which is for reading, and a 1 for executing to sum up 5. Meaning that for users in a group, they always have the ability of reading and executing. And where we do have a summation of 6, that means that we have a 4 plus 2, meaning that the owner of this, for example, the fact that I created this, I have the ability of reading and writing. So that is how we always come up with those values. And of course, there are always permissions, so you can always do more research on this furthermore. So precisely, it means that, for example, here the owner, I'm the owner of this file because this is a 0644, meaning that I can read and write. Then any other groups of users that would access maybe the cPanel maybe can only read this file, but they cannot modify it. And then the last 4 for the group of public, anyone else can only read. So that is the meaning. So we also have the ability of creating folders by clicking on this menu item. And for example, you can also maybe create a folder called demo. And you always have to select the path where this folder is also going to be created. Then you click on create. So you see that this folder has been created. And of course, if you're a beginner, the way we open search content is double clicking. So I double click this and it goes ahead and opens up this directory. So a folder is more like a directory, and at this point of time you can see that it is empty. So to go back or to navigate back to the directory, you just click on up one level. So I move back and you see that I navigate back, and so whenever this is active, it means that you can go back to the top level folders. So when I move back, you see that now it opens up all the root files and folders for the home directory. So within the public HTML folder, you also have the ability of, for example, moving files. When you select a file and then right click, you see that we also have other options of downloading, viewing, editing, moving, copying, renaming, changing permissions, deleting, and compressing. So for example, if I wanted to move this text file into the demo folder, I select move. Then instead of public, I can just go ahead and update this to demo. Then I say move files, so it goes ahead and automatically moves it. Then when we double click and open this folder, sorry, I think I poorly moved it. Okay, so if I right click again, and now the fact that the demo is in the public HTML folder, so the way we move this is, first of all, we access the public, then /demo. So when I move, you see that it has been moved, and then when I come back into the public HTML, then I open up the demo, you can now see that the text does exist. The file exists, and when I right click, you always have the ability of, for example, renaming this to maybe demo file, like that. Then you also have the ability of downloading. You see this is downloaded, and of course when you select, you can also view. And the fact that this file is empty, so there isn't any content in here, and you can also go ahead and delete it. For example, if I delete it, so in terms of deleting, you always have the ability of maybe deleting it permanently, or you can also have it deleted temporarily in the trash folder. So for example, for now, I can just confirm this, and you see that it has been deleted. So when I move one level up and re-access the demo, you see that it is empty. But when I go into the view trash, you see that this file has now been stored temporarily here. And of course, you always have the ability of, for example, restoring it back to where it originally existed. So if I move back here, So you see that this now already exists. Now with the file manager, you also have the ability of uploading for files, but most of the times the files that we do upload are zipped files. And whenever I click on upload, it will always redirect you to this web page. And you always have the maximum upload size, which is at this point of time 9.76 GB, and you can also overwrite any other existing files upon the upload process. So for now, we are not going to be uploading. It's just going to be a tour of what exactly the features are in here. Then you can also search for files in here. And in terms of the settings, there are always cases whereby some folders and files are hidden. So you can always click on show hidden files so that you see, for example, files with maybe dot files. And if you save this, of course, for now, you see that the .well-known folder is now visible. But if I ensure that this is set to default, you see that it is not existing there. So for now, this is the file manager. And then in terms of the file manager, you also have the other tool, which is the Git version control feature. And this is always where we have the ability of, for example, integrating our GitHub repositories with the cPanel to ensure that we have the ability of maybe making changes through Git and automatically having the changes updated in the cPanel, and we shall see that later. But this is how the interface looks like. And of course, if you want to create a new repo, you always have to ensure that you have an existing remote repository in that you just go ahead and paste the URL here, and then the path where you want this to be cloned, and also the repository name, like that. So for now, we are going to just look at how things are structured here. So that was the Git version control feature. And then the third feature is, so maybe before we move into the third feature, allow me to also clarify that we always use the file manager to upload our project files, and most of the times they're always going to be zipped files. So for example, if you're working on a Flask project, that means that you're going to make use of the file manager to go ahead and upload your files, in that they are stored within a particular path, as we shall see. While in the file manager, when you click on, for example, the logo cPanel, it will redirect you back to the tools of the cPanel here.